What do you think is driving this trade at this point? I mean, we had various chip companies come out and warn, including NVIDIA and various Apple suppliers. I mean, is the thinking that semiconductors are somehow a canary in the coal mine when it comes to fears about global growth?
Yes. Semiconductors underpin almost every segment of the economy. And, the weakness that we're seeing is not just Apple iPhones. I think, every single end market is slowing with, maybe the one exception being PCs. And then on top, you have too much inventory across the supply chain. We saw most semiconductor companies cut numbers across the board in October. I think you're going to see that again in January. And then you have this U.S.-China thing, which is, a layer of uncertainty on top of a weak fundamental backdrop.
Romit, I want to ask you, I was going to ask Dan this question, but I'll ask you as well. I mean, how much of this sell-off also, not just for the chips, but for the FANG stocks and a lot of the technology stocks, has to do with the multiples that the Wall Street had assigned to these companies? They're starting to rein it in, obviously, expecting slower growth right now. But the breadth of the sell-off suggests that maybe they were just getting too optimistic about this group as a whole. What do you think?
I mean, with the FANG stocks, the multiples might have been an issue. I think with semis, the last few years, we didn't have a cycle, and a lot of investors got lulled into believing that semiconductors weren't cyclical anymore. And as we've seen over the last 3 months, that's not the case. When the economy takes a pause or starts to slow down, semiconductor companies get hit really hard.
So Romit, there's been what can only be characterized as a bloodbath in many parts of the semiconductor space. So let's take us through the thinking. Where are the opportunities that are the most compelling? Is it in flash memory? Is it in video and graphics chips? Is it in analog semiconductors? Which parts that have been beaten up the most are the places that you find the most upside potential, given everything that we've seen over the course of the past, arguably 6 to 9 months?
Well, I've seen a number of my competitors, pound the table or upgrade NVIDIA. I think it's too early there. The name that I like the most, ironically, is an Apple supplier, and that's Broadcom. And the thinking on Broadcom is, look, they just closed the acquisition of a company called CA Technologies. Software business, raises their margins, lowers their Apple exposure to less than 15%. Broadcom should grow next year, which I think will be a rarity in the semiconductor space. The other thing that CA does is it boosts their cash flow by over by over $1 billion. So you'll see Broadcom on Thursday when they report, I think, raise their dividend to a level that would imply about a 4% yield. And next year, we think the dividend could go as high as $12 plus. So Broadcom's a low multiple stock. It's underperformed this year. I think you get revenue and earnings growth next year, plus a pretty solid dividend. Broadcom's our top pick.
Do you think the idea, Romit, that there could be M&A in the space has been revived? I mean, given what you had talked about in terms of oversupply in the industry, given that the stocks have been beaten down, and now that China had said that it would review Qualcomm and XPI should it come back to it with a more open mind, I'm just wondering if you think perhaps M&A is back on.
It's a good question, Melissa. I think there's another wave of M&A that needs to happen in the space, but the executives, among all these companies need to have a better sense of what their business is going to look like next year. Are we going into a recession? If not, how much is our business going to decline? That's an important question for any buyer. And then for the sellers, I mean, their stocks in many cases have been cut in half. The last thing they want to be doing is selling at a 10 or 20% premium, even off of these levels. So I think the market needs to stabilize. I think we need to get better visibility into what 2019 looks like. And then once that happens, I think you're absolutely right. We'll see another wave.